I spent over 5 months building this leather Lego man. Just look at these two heads, the difference is obvious. This one on the left was my first attempt. It's a math. The gaps are huge. I was wondering, why can't I get that plastic precision? But once I found the right logic, I was able to build the rest of the body. Today, I'm breaking down these 3 major mistakes I made and the 4 key lessons I learned the hard way. If you're a designer or leather crafter, I hope this video can keep you away from the mistakes I made. Mistake number 1. Overcomplicating the design. Initially, I designed this with a nested structure. Based on the pattern, I cut all the leather pieces in advance. Using white glue, stacked the layers one by one to build it up. The head was no exception. It consisted of 5 parts, and then started sanding. My purpose was to make them to perfectly fly. My machine had a 90-degree platform, and I thought I could rely on that to get the perfect flying edges. But because the head was too tall for the machine, I had to sand each section separately. When it finished, problem appeared. The inner curves didn't match at all. I searched for the cause and realized that I was too rushed. I hadn't drawn the correct template at the very beginning. Once I marked the center line, I saw that both sides were completely crooked. So to fix it, I covered the surface with masking tape and trimmed the edges, then peeled it off and let it fly on cardboard. After remeasuring and drawing, I realized how huge the error was. The gap was undeniable. But just as I was fixing it, disaster struck. The machine swallowed my baby. That one hit destroyed everything. The head was ruined, and I had to start it over. To make sure it's never happened again, I added a safety net on it. So mistake number 2 is relying on hand feel and the power machine. To make it easier to understand, I use this finished one to show you my original plan. The edges with 4 round corners on each side, plus 2 inner curves at the bottom. I used to believe that the power sander could down it all. Besides, based on the first failure, I changed my strategy that to shape the curve first, then the outline. I used an angle ruler to mark my guidelines. Then switch to the large sanding wheel to bulk remove the excess. It saves a lot of time this way. The work went smoothly as I expected. Then I switched to a small wheel for the inner curves. It definitely looked better than before. But a new problem showed up. I couldn't use the ruler anymore when the first curve was down. What I could do was blend sanding by feel. Luckily, the curves looked okay. When I tried to fit the second part of this head, a massive gap still remained. I figured the magnetic pull may be enough to solve this problem later. For the connection, I want to use a magnet to make it all snap together. To make them fit, I had to sacrifice some space from the skull design. Finally, I drew those lines to line up with these 4 holes. And this is how the magnet gets installed. To keep them from falling out, I figured super glue would be the most effective way to go. Yep, it's pretty good. This is the second part of the head, and the magnets are already in. My plan was to snap them together before sanding, so I could keep the margin of the error as small as possible. Sanding it down quickly, just like always. Since I've done this before, I wasn't really worried anymore. As I get closer to finishing, I start easing up on the pressure because even the tiniest slip up means starting all over again. God blessed, it worked as expected. Look, the magnets were stable and the gaps seem to be gone. Sanding the inner curve is the final step before it's down. I'm sure you guys can already picture how the technique goes. These two parts are finally down. Whether it's the magnetic pull, the tightness of the gaps, or the overall profile, whatever metric I use, I'm actually pretty happy with how they turned out. To make sure the small wheel could actually fit, I ended up modifying the inner curves one more time. With the leather skull finished, the inner dimension set, and the magnets perfect in place, I was all set to move on to the third part. At this point, I wasn't even worried about the part 4 and part 5. I just needed to focus on the magnet polarity, making sure they are facing the right way. One thing worth mentioning is that I grouped the magnets right in the middle of the part 5, by clustering them in the center. Since the section is thinner, I wanted to keep the option open for swapping out face plates later. At the same time, I overlooked the gaps caused by the weaker magnetic pull near the edges. I wondered if I could use the natural moldability of vegetation leather to close them up. So I wet the leather and wrap it in plastic wrap to keep the pressure on overnight while it dried. First thing the next morning, good news! Just like I expected, the gaps were gone. I start the same routine as before, angles first, then the outline. Now, time for the final result. And oh my god, it's a bullshit. First, the curves on the two sides weren't symmetrical. When I tried to mock up the design, the surface was a mess. Just bumps everywhere. 2, what really got me was the super glue. It aced through the leather and the magnets just fell off. And 3, the gaps. They're back. Honestly, I'm just incredibly frustrated at this point. I've spent over 10 days at this head, and the result was honestly a joke. At that moment, I only had that 2 choices. Give up or start back at square one. If it were you, what would you do? To avoid failing again, I didn't rush back in. Instead, I just sat there, looking at it, and breaking down what went wrong. Now, here's the most important part for you. I summed it up into 4 key lessons. Lesson number 1, simplicity is the king. I can't believe that what inspired me was just a chopstick. The same kind I use for dinner every day. What crazy was that the diameter was exactly the same as the magnets. And then it hits me. Why am I killing myself with magnets when I have this? I did a quick test with some scrap leather, and the advantages were just undeniable. It's basically free. The cost is 0, which means you can grab this for free at any convenience store or supermarket. The next is It makes the templating process rock solid by using the chopsticks to pin the cardboard and the leather together through the holes. Every line I draw is perfectly precise. Now I can replicate the exact same dimensions on different pieces of leather, and they line up perfectly every single time. And then it can eliminate the risk of ruins during sanding. Once the head is pinned together with the chopsticks, the parts cannot shift or wobble anymore. It really taught me a lesson. Sometimes you need to stop chasing the shiny objects and look at the ordinary things around you. The best solution is always the simplest one, hiding right under your nose. The second is less is more. To play it safe, I cut the 5 parts down to 3. Now it's much more stable and resistant than my original design. In leather craft, holding back your ego is often the best way to express your craft. And to top of it, I even learned how to make my own leather hardener and CMC gel. Before gluing, I pre-treated every single piece with it. This keeps wrapping to an absolute minimum. And here's the best part. The hardener also acts as a glaze and a protector. That rich color and high glow finish you see, that's all thanks to it. To give you a better idea of how this works, I've already filmed a video on how to make and use the leather hardener. I will leave the link in the comments, so check it out. I used the CMC gel to further fuse the surface. I sanded more times to get the final result. Zero wrapping, zero bending, and for the CMC gel video, I'm still working on it. Once it's ready, I drop the link in the comments and post an update to let you guys know. Lesson number 4. Self-made standard over power machine. After that first trial, I changed my approach. Following the same logic as the chopsticks, I built a custom sanding tool with a built-in gauge. Now, I only use the power machine to sand down to the last millimeter. Then I switch to my DIY tool. The physical limit forces the leather to be sanded exactly where I set it. No more guessing. No more handshakes. So, explaining the whole story behind the tool would take another forever. To keep things clear, I'm making a separate video to show you how I built this for less than $2 in about 30 minutes. Once it's done, I'll post an update and drop the new links in the comment below. So through this experiment, I finally regained my feel for the leather and found the right logic to control it. Up next, I'll be tackling even more complex body structures, including building a complete leather skull and a full skeleton to fit inside. I'm going to show you exactly how I do it in the next few videos. So see you later.